Okay, got that figured out. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for involving me. My name is Robert Hoffman, and I guess I've been doing this NDM thing for a little while here. I'm going to talk about one little bit of work that I did. This involved expertise in weather forecasting and some of the findings and how they fit in with the NDM paradigm. So I worked for a couple of years at this place. It's a Navy base. This is the airfield primary building, which includes the aviation activities and also the weather forecasting activities. And here you can see the region where the pilots and pilot trainers would come in to get information from the forecasters before they go out on a flight. These two gentlemen in the flight suits are actually trainers. This facility trains Navy pilots, so they are in charge of a group of trainees, and they're about to take them out for their daily practice. The gray-haired gentleman sitting here is one of the senior experts, and this seaman in the white uniform is one of the junior aerographers, which is a Navy term. Over here, you see a more experienced aerographer, again talking to a couple of pilots. So we started by mapping out the workspace, every filing cabinet, every piece of equipment, who worked there, what did they do, what were their information requirements, who did they talk to, what information did they share, to sort of map out the activities. And then we started to engage in some detailed interviewing. Here you can see me up at the whiteboard guiding these two gentlemen. The gentleman on the right was an expert. The gentleman on the left was a junior expert. And we're building a knowledge model of how they think about weather forecasting and how they think about the weather. And we represented that knowledge using diagrams like this, concept maps. This is one of, we made a couple of 300 concept maps. It's what it takes to describe expertise, very detailed. And this one is just about the effects of the Gulf of Mexico on regional weather. And you notice these little icons here that are underneath the concept nodes. Those icons take you out to other resources. They can link to other concept maps. They can link to imagery. They can link to text. And so this screenshot shows some of those things that are open. So the individual who is exploring this model of the expert's knowledge can actually access the data that are used in forecasting, as shown here by radar imagery and wind fields in the lower left, and then also in the upper right, an image from a document that describes air masses. So all of these different kinds of resources can be viewed within the context of the expert knowledge. Here's a particular case study. It included a lot of case studies. This was a case study in forecasting hurricane tracks. You can see in the right here, this forecaster's hand-drawn diagram relying on reports from buoys out in the Gulf of Mexico in order to determine the track of this particular hurricane. And here you see in the lower left here, the commander of the facility who's describing a particular process. We call this shoulder standing. It makes people who visit this knowledge model, it makes them feel as if they can stand on the shoulders of the expert as the expert describes forecasting for a particular weather situation. And as Gary referred to earlier, a lot of models that have been put forward in the cognitive sciences about describing various processes, they're simple chains. And this is one of the more popular ones. It would be great if we could take data and turn that information into information, and then we have to turn it into knowledge, and then we have to turn that into understanding. And these kinds of step 1, step 2, step 3 models are common. They derive from the tradition of information processing, which was foundational to cognitive psychology back in the 1960s. But as we're finding in NDM work, reasoning doesn't actually work that way. Here's a model that I put together describing the expert weather forecasters. And you can see here in the colored loops that the reasoning involves lots of loops and loops inside of loops. So there's a problem of the day, and then in line with the notion of recognition prime decision making, the forecaster will show up at the forecasting facility and already knows what the problem of the day is going to be. If it's summertime, it'll be baroclinic thunderstorms, whatever. They have always already watched the Weather Channel and so on. So they have some idea of what the problem of the day is going to be. And so they already have some idea of what kinds of actions they'll have to take. So they'll examine some data. And then at that point, they might recognize exactly what the situation is, go back to their action queue, and then act. And that's recognition prime decision making. But they might then go from data examination to a revision of their mental model. And they're constantly looking at data, new radar imagery as it comes along, pilot reports as they come along, bulletins and announcements from the National Weather Service as they come along. So they're constantly examining data to maintain situation awareness of what's going on in the actual weather. And that can result in the identification of leverage points, gaps in knowledge. What information do I need that I'm not finding? What's making the situation difficult for me? And that will feed back into a refinement of the action queue. So what we see is it's not a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, input, output. It's loops and loops within loops. And so this fits very much with a very important model that Gary and his colleagues put forward quite some years ago, called the data frame model of sense-making. Up at the top, you can see a nested loop. The data allow one to recognize or construct a frame or a mental model. And your current mental model allows you to decide what counts as new data. Once you've got that initial understanding, you can question it. You can keep track of anomalies, look for inconsistencies, make judgments of plausibility, gauge the quality of data. And at that point, you might decide that you need to elaborate your mental model. Or over here on the right, you might decide that, no, I'm thinking about this in completely the wrong way. I need to have a new model altogether. So this is quite consistent with the model that I had developed at about the same time of the weather forecasting experts. Within the field of meteorology and weather forecasting in particular, we see a lot of the same kinds of questionable ideas about the role of automation. It's often assumed that automation is autonomous. And so whenever anyone invokes the word automation, they're bringing along with it some notion that the machine is autonomous. But automation, computers, they're never autonomous. They're never autonomous, just like people are never completely autonomous. And in the case of weather forecasting, and indeed many other domains, it's always the humans who correct the machines when something's going wrong. There's the myth that machines outperform humans. And this assumes that efficiency for the machine means the same as it does for humans. And it's not. Machines can do certain things very well, but humans can do certain things very well that machines are absolutely incapable of doing. There's the myth that computers generate forecasts, and we see this often. Whoop, I don't know how that happened. The myth that computers generate forecasts. Well, here's our latest forecast generated by our computers, but computers don't generate forecasts. They generate very specific point predictions: wind direction, wind speed, humidity, temperature, dew point, all of that. And this helps set up this mindset of man versus machine. Will computers eventually take over and eliminate the need for human weather forecasters completely? But as the saying goes among forecasters, a forecaster can't generate a good forecast using the computer models unless she or he can generate a good forecast without using those models. We also see this myth that, oh, all we need is more data. If we had just more data, we'd solve all these wonderful problems, and bang, a miracle would happen. But then that results in data overload, which is then used to justify the need for more processing systems and more AI. So it becomes sort of self-fulfilling. And then there's also this myth, which we see a lot, especially in the popular press, but also in some technical writings, which is somewhat distressing to me, that all we need is more computing power, and bang, there'll be a miracle, and the machine can replace the human altogether. So I've been working to try and inform the meteorology community that it would be well served to try and escape these various myths. The relationship that computers have to forecasters is one of interdependence. The humans always depend upon the computer. The computer helps provide them, the computers and the sensors provide them with data. But the computer depends upon the human in many, many ways. When the computer model gets out of whack with reality, it's always the human who jumps in to realign the computer model with that reality. So here's a case study that I use, a March 1993 superstorm, winter superstorm. And it was very, very difficult, let me say non-trivial, to forecast where the heavy snowfalls would be. And the forecasters were crucial, the humans. Sometimes the computer models agreed, sometimes they didn't. Well, the humans had to navigate that. The humans had to refine the forecast to pinpoint the areas of heaviest snow, and forecasting a squall line of snow and where it's going to be and how heavy the snowfall will be is definitely non-trivial. And also the timing for the development of blizzard conditions. So the human was depending upon the computer, but the computer was depending upon the human. So it's not human versus machine, it's human plus machine. Forecasters will consult many different models before making a prediction. Again, computers don't generate forecasts, humans do. Forecasters will choose the most probable future state based on their understanding of the current conditions and take into account the ways in which different models have their own biases of over-predicting and under-predicting under different circumstances. And conversely, the technology is heavily dependent upon the forecaster, adjusting various calculations and reinitializing the computer models, recognizing and eliminating spurious feature detections in radar images, that sort of thing. So I advocate for this stance. Computers have limitations and depend on humans to keep them aligned with the world. Humans have strengths and need computers to maintain their situational awareness. This sort of takes a traditional viewpoint and turns it on its head, where the emphasis has been computers have strengths and humans have limitations. So we're just flipping that on its head. And that, I think, is a major theme of applied NDM research. Thank you very much.